I'm talking to Renee from now on.
I'd like to call the meeting to order. Thank everyone for attending this evening. Let the record reflect that we have Ed Hussman absent. He had a family thing he had to deal with this evening, and we don't have our student rep here this evening. Review of the agenda. Did I skip the flag support? So let's go ahead and do the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Review of the agenda. Are there any changes, additions?
Yeah, I just wanted to announce that we were working on a year-long policy plan, and we'll resume our work next month.
Okay. I was curious about that.
And the second thing is underneath presentations, under what would be ASB, let's do the legislative report under there. Committees and association
Okay,
reports.
under the, okay. You want to do the ledge conference report?
Yeah, I was gonna put it at the end, but it'd be nice if, people are here, they get to hear it as well. And that's all I have.
Okay. We have no one signed up to speak this evening, and so I'll ask for questions, comments on the consent agenda as included in our packet. There are no questions? I'll ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda in our packet.
So moved.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
A second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, all opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Financial report, Dan, you're on.
All right, directors, good evening. I want to just kind of touch on something that was in the cover sheet, and just has kind of been reinforcing a theme that we have seen as I walk you through this. It's going to be a continuation, really, of, I think the district has done a very good job as far as their expenditures are concerned. It just continues to be some revenues that are lagging, that are causing some downward pressure as far as our fund balance, and I'll kind of touch on that as we get a little bit further into this. So, enrollment for March 2023. We did see a little bit of a change downward versus the prior month, specifically in our traditional enrollment. Traditional was down 14.45. ALE was up 5.20, so the net was a negative 9.25 versus prior month. So that would be March versus February. Typically, this time of the year is when we start to see some declines in enrollments. That's not that atypical to see that, especially when we see at the semester break, where we talked about last month, movement from traditional to ALE. We see that a lot. And then continuing to some of the graphic representations that I share with you month after month. Kindergarten, maybe the second one there, 174.4. So again, our kindergarten class far outpaces any of the other years under review. And then next year we're expecting even more. Next year coming because of those. When we look at the traditional enrollment, the graph for a traditional enrollment versus the ALE enrollment kind of shows you what we were touching on, is that we saw growth from September, October, November, dip in December and January, and then now we've seen a couple of successive months of the traditional enrollment dropping. But if you look at the ALE, then it's just the opposite, is that you see it spiking up quite dramatically. It was very flat, very close to the 45, all the way through January. It was hugging that line very, very closely. And then again, that semester break in February, we saw a significant jump in February, but we've continued to see that in the month of March as well. So that, because as I mentioned in my earlier comments, we did see an increase in ALE, but a decrease in traditional. So we're continuing to see kids move from the traditional to ALE programs. The property tax assessment, again, we are coming up to our spring collection for our new issues for Prop 1 and Prop 2. So those amounts have been levied and are shown for calendar year 2023, and the total amounts outstanding for your general fund, your bond fund, and your capital projects fund. Again, our bond fund is currently inactive, but it is still represented there by amounts from prior years, and then our capital projects fund. Our budget status reports for general fund, $1,911,229. For capital projects fund 20, $1,145,521. Fund 30, our debt service fund, $127,444. Our Associated Student Body Fund, $184,093. And Fund 90, Transportation Vehicle Fund, $196,091. And then we have the exceptions reports, salaries, benefits, materials, supplies, and operating costs, and all areas. Again, the theme has been very consistent, as I said in my open, is expenditures have been at or below proportionate share pretty much for the entire year. What the challenge has been on the revenue side. Specifically, the Department of Natural Resources proceeds has been the biggest one that has just not been coming in to the level that we would expect. But the majority of those for salaries benefits are in green. Green again means below proportionate share. Yellow would indicate above proportionate share, but less than 10% above, and red would be greater than 10% above. The special pilot programs, again, the comments down below will help explain the colors a little bit as far as some of those that are kind of jumping out at you. The special and pilot programs reflects grants, again, not known at that time. It's predominantly a grant that we got, what's called the Digital Equity Grant that Dave had for the IT department that is funding a technician support person for the IT department. So that was unknown at the time that we did our budget. Material supplies and operating costs, again, we're 6% below as far as MSOC is concerned. A few that are above, but again, the comments will speak to those. But predominantly, most are below proportionate share. Again, we're at the 50% halfway point of the year. Through February at the halfway point. And then when you look at all expenditures, all objects of expenditure, we're 1.3% below. So again, expenditure control, we've done a good job in controlling the expenditures through the first half of the year. Now, there are some things that will tend to put pressure on MSOCs as we go into the second half of the year. I know that IT has their large annual purchase. Dave tends to buy his licensing and things like that towards the tail end of the year. Charlie will have summer projects that will be coming up here. And so there will be, I expect that negative number to drop as we head into the second half of this year, just because of annualized purchases and summer projects. So I think that number will, that negative will become smaller. We're looking at the fund balance history. Had a nice little unexpected surprise. I think we mentioned it to you, is that we had an increase in our transportation allocation. Our 4199 revenue jumped from about $1.4 million to $1.7 million for the year. And in the month of February, we got the back payment for the months of September through current, and then we got a larger slice moving forward. So that was a nice unexpected little shot in the arm there. That, along with being able to finally get our year-to-date title grants. Title I, Title II, Title III have all moved to a new grant claiming system, and there were some challenges in getting that system online, but we were able to get that. So between the transportation and claiming the year-end, was able to increase the projected fund balance significantly. So now we're looking at about $1.445 million, which is very close to where we had put our budget. Now you might say, well, if you look at that, the August number, the $1.445 million versus the prior year, which was almost $2.4 million, you might say, well, what changed? Again, getting back to the DNR money, okay? DNR money, so far, we have collected less than $100,000.
And we expected 1.2.
1.2 was the budget number. So if those dollars don't start, rolling in at a more robust rate, that's going to be what's going to put that downward pressure. It's not expenditures, it's revenues, okay? It is revenues that are just not coming in at the level of which we had expected them. And as I had said before, we will be making allowances for that in our budget for next year. We will be dialing those numbers back. This was the third, looks potentially to be the third consecutive month where we will not receive any DNR. That has happened before. Last time was 10 years ago. Believe it or not, 2013, in the same months, January, February, March, we got 0 DNR dollars for 3 consecutive months. So it's not a common
year work out. Did we?
We got 500, a little under 500,000 for the year, that year. But we did have 3 consecutive months, there was none. So it has happened before, it's been a while, but it has happened before. So we are going through a kind of a dry spell right now. And then you're kind of looking at the monthly fund balance, the graphic representations of that. And then, again, if the 1.445 does come to fruition, that'll put us at 4.3%, which is within the 4% allowance for fund balance. Overall, again, I guess that would be just the theme that I would leave you with. The expenditures, I think we're doing a great job in being very judicious in how we're spending those dollars. It's just we're waiting for some of those budgeted revenues to start coming in at a rate that we thought that they would.
Questions?
Is there no way, so they don't tell us how much or when or anything? You just happens to show up in your bank account one day?
So we have a tool where when a harvest is sold, that I can plug it. It's taken a lot of digging to figure this out. But the challenge is what is the harvest schedule on a harvest that's happening? Is it paid in a lump sum, or is it what do they call it, a species sale? And they pay those differently. So one is on the front end, and one is on the back end, or as they go. But we've got a tool where when, based on the board feet that are generated, the cost of the board feet, the millage rate, what we owe DNR, I can kind of predict what a sale will do. By the time the sale is sold, or bid on and sold, and it goes to the state treasurer's office and finally makes the county treasurer's office, it's lost somewhere.
Do you believe we still have money owed to us that's going to be coming in this year?
I analyzed it a couple months ago because there were two sales that, because I have guys email me directly from DNR, just so I can try to figure out what's going on. And it looked to me like there was more money owed. But I don't know why. I think we're probably even because we shouldn't have 3 blank months. I don't understand.
Is there anyone to talk to, that has that information, or is it just such a
Yeah,
bureaucracy?
there's a lawyer in Forks that is trying to figure this out. He's about as close as you can get. And talk to DNR, and they point you to somebody else in DNR. And
It's a circle. We've tried
Yeah.
through the years.
Yeah, I'm looking back at that year in 12-13, there was actually 4 months in that year that we got 0. And you got 400, just sort of 500,000, but in 1 month, 331,000 of that 500 came in 1 month.
so I got an
1 month.
email today, and here's what it said. Greg Lewis, I get him too. There's a guy named John Moon and a guy named Greg Lewis, and they send me different reports. Today, here's the 27th of March. This one confused me. Hi everyone. For those of you not informed of the recent change, timber sale updates are now consolidated onto one spreadsheet. Go to our Northwest Region homepage and click on the Northwest Share documents on the left. Look at the timber sale updates and shared information state lands. It's all there. So I saw that and I didn't get to do it today, but I will do it tonight when I go home. So I don't know. Usually he sends me the sale that are in our coded area, and I have a spreadsheet that comes right to me. So they've decided to consolidate, I guess.
And you've got to look for our piece on this.
Yes. So I'm gonna go in there and look tonight when I get home.
When you find that out, what you perceive, maybe send an email out or text.
And I can also see every month I get the packet for their Board of Natural Resource meetings. It'll say upcoming timber sales. So I have an idea of what ones in our area will come up, whether it's a full sale or it's just partially overlaps in our area. So I can get an idea, but it's really difficult to budget the money. It's never been easy.
Any other questions? Thank you. Next up, I guess we have a ledge conference report.
So, I had a call today, right before this, about, it was the monthly legislative rep call. So both budgets have been released. The House was today, the Senate was last week. They're very different. So it'll be interesting to see how they, get them closer together. A couple things that were pointed out, the library or librarian bill, that's right now 1 teacher librarian per 1,000 students for Class 1 districts.
We're 2.
Yeah, so if we turn into a Class 1.
We're
Then-
right. We're really right
Yeah.
there. I think it's a 3-year period you go through before they say, hey, you're over 2,000 officially. Because we've been over and done back and been over.
There's advantages.
Yeah. And then the other one she brought up was the recess bill, 30 minutes of daily recess per full school day, which is where I think big with that, but it has a lot of like, you should do this, you shouldn't do that, not you have to. So I think that we'll be fine with that. The Senate one has a lot of money for special ed and then money for special transportation. So, looking good. And the other thing we talked about was submitting proposals to WASDA for, priorities and things like that. And it was recommended that we spend some time each meeting from now until the window opens April 17th. If we have any platform revisions that we'd like to, anything we'd like to change, add, get rid of.
Well, it's hard because we don't know what they're going to do with some of those bills. If they fund special education properly, and that, for me, that becomes that issue gets better and something else bubbles to the top.
Yeah.
And they want it in 2.5 weeks, basically.
Well, kind of. I've got some more information just today, and I'll email it to you guys. Kind of like the checklist for things if we want to do any changes or whatever, and the timeline and everything. We can go over that. And that's kind of it.
Thank you.
Do you guys know that there's no mics on? So it's really hard to hear all of you.
Live or?
Those mics aren't on?
No.
Maybe you should scoot forward a little.
And we can try to talk louder.
Well, it's loud back there and then there's nothing. You guys aren't.
Those mics, I think, are for YouTube.
They are.
We'll talk louder. Is that better?
We should have them.
Yeah.
No, I'm just, usually they're louder. Usually it's much louder.
All right, next up, Mike. We're next up, Mike Marin.
Speak up.
Good evening. Thank you so much for allowing me to come and give you an update. I wanted to start, I asked Kayla to bring up, so I'm talking about state testing, and I'll kind of tell you where we've been in this year already. So pretty much every group, she's going to stop right there, that's where we're going to kind of look at, it's in your packet also. But where we've been is our English language learners are assessed every year, and so they are finished their window of testing, and that's also a January through March window. And so all of our, we've packed up the last box, and we were waiting for we had some kids that are not on the US soil, as they're visiting homelands, and so they didn't get back in time for us to test, so we had to hold their test until the very last day of testing. Then we just put in the documentation that they're out of country, and so that's something that happens, and so we zipped up the last box that will go tomorrow. So WIDA is done, WIDA is that name of that test. And then another kind of special population is our highly capable students. Highly capable testing is finishing this week. The window closes at on the 31st. And we do the COGAT, which is the kind of the general test. We start with a screener for 3rd grade, and then we have all of the, and I've explained that process where parents put in, our parents or teachers put in a request for a student to be tested, and all of that COGAT testing is done. This year we're adding a nonverbal test, which is something that the state strongly encourages each district to do, is to have 2 different types of measures that help build equity within the system. And so we started this year with the nonverbal test called the Naglieri, and that's named after Dr. Naglieri, and but it's a test that comes with a good record of being able to identify students who would have more of those skills. And we're giving that test in the 1st grade, and so Laura Blasco, who's our TOSA for highly capable, is finishing that test this week. So now let's go to the general population. So, and that's where we turn into the piece. And I kind of put this together in kind of the form of teaching and learning. And so each year we start with the previous year's data. So we had testing, state testing that happened last April, May, and we had results. And we know that we want to get those results up. And so, but in your graphic, you actually see that we start with the Washington State Learning Standards. And Gigi knows the Washington State Learning Standards, and so does Cindy, because they've sat on instructional materials, and that's what we base our assessment of instructional materials. And so those two are side by side. We start with the state standards and we go to curricular materials. Go down the page on the right-hand side, and then you have excellent instruction, and that's all of the teaching and learning that happens in classrooms and out of classrooms, because we know that it happens in both places. And so that's really the teaching part of it, and it is part of the prep in state testing, so I put it into the graphic so you can actually see it. Then we have all the different types of assessment that we do. So it starts at the classroom level, those classroom-based assessments, those ongoing things that teachers are doing to find out, formative assessment that allows them to check the learning that's going on and adjust their instruction to make sure that they're doing those things. So that's started at the base level there. And then 3 times a year, we do diagnostic assessments. In the elementaries, we're using iReady. Middle school, we're using AimsWeb, and then in 9th grade, we use iReady also. We're fixing that. You've probably heard a problem there.
Yeah.
And so we're fixing that this year. So for next year, we'll have one concurrent system that will go from kindergarten through.
Are we going to the iReady or the middle school system?
We are still examining all the possibilities. It's, you know, there are factors in there that we want to make sure, but it's a great question, and I think that that's something that we do need to have great diagnostic assessments, and so that's something that iReady and our elementaries are getting excellent data from that, and they are able to actually guide specific work that needs to be done to close gaps, and that's what we're trying to do. We're still coming up with that COVID. And then we get to the progress monitoring, and those are the more frequent look at kind of skill sets, and so those could be done more often than the diagnostics. Diagnostics are really just, you know, there's a combination of pieces that are going down. We're going to go down the left-hand side now, and now we get to the state testing category. And so the state testing is the Smarter Balance Consortium has a test that they prepare because those are the learning standards that we're using in the state of Washington. And so Smarter Balance is an assessment in mathematics and in ELA. There's all sorts of tasks that are involved in that, and so right now our teachers are using interim assessments that are also published by Smarter Balance, but they're also using a variety of other skills and materials to prepare students to make sure that they have good test taking skills. They understand the format of the test. They're able to log on because it goes into a secure browser when they log onto their computers, and so we need to make sure that we have all of those pieces. The WACAS is the Washington Comprehensive Assessment of Science, and that's done in 5th, 8th, and 11th grades. The SBAC is done 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 10th. And so then you have the 11th, 8th, and 5th grade science. So there's also a huge cadre, if you can imagine, as many buttons that you could select. That's as many types of things that you have. We have practice tests, and we have training tests, and we have our students that are really doing that. So so we have all of those things in state testing, and take some questions.
Did I understand that between the science test and the SBAC, no test for freshmen?
No test for freshmen, that is correct, yes. 9th grade is their year off, because in 8th grade they have 3.
Double, right, 3.
3, because they have a math, they have an ELA, and they have a science.
Other questions?
No. Thank you.
All right, I gave you a nice little, kind of some reading material, light reading, but I felt like there was some more there that I'm not talking about because it's really just general information on state testing. And thanks to the PTA who published that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Next up, Paul?
Good evening, directors. Let it be noted, I did not give you any homework to do. So I get to talk about the fun thing tonight is a sensory playground. So we were lucky to get some funding from a philanthropist group that Mike and actually Dan brought in, and so we talked to them the last couple of weeks, and they were able to donate some money to us. About $15,960 is the amount that we'll be using to put in a sensory playground right here at SES under the covered area. One of the reasons for the sensory playground is just the number of students that we are getting with sensory issues. You know, students can have that label of autism, but they don't have to. Just the number of sensory issues in general, that's increased significantly. So with having this playground, it actually gives us another work site, another work site for our teachers and our occupational therapists to work with students, and we can break the classroom into multiple workstations that way. So one of the approaches that we're trying next year is actually doing an integrated multidisciplinary approach in our SLC classrooms. Actually, just this one classroom at SES here. We're kind of piloting that, and that is to bring all our therapists and the teacher in together and work within their disciplines to work with students all together. So it's like I said, a multidisciplinary approach instead of single disciplines working individually. It's all working together. So the OT and the teacher will work simultaneously how to present maybe an academic concept and then utilize the sensory approach to emphasize it in the neural pathways. So that's kind of one of the reasons for this sensory piece here. Also with the sensory playground, a lot of our students need that the sensory action and gross motor skills to actually reset. It helps to reset their body. So that's just one of the advantages of having it, and I think it's going to make a big difference as we move. We're just looking for different ways to address some of the challenges that we see, and we're hoping this will help.
This is maybe a stupid question, but it's more uninformed for me. What would be the device in a sensory playground? I have no concept of what that is.
So-
I should, but I don't.
Yeah, well, the sensory playground is so you have the touch, the listen, you're increasing the different tactile senses for one, auditory senses are probably the biggest ones. You also have the noise component as well, the auditory. So those senses there, actually, it's kind of strange how it works. So you have the high senses in the classroom, but if the student can go into a smaller area and access the senses, it kind of narrows it down for them. So it's not all around them, it narrows it in, it creates the focus for them. And if you want me to go further in depth,
Well,
I'll have to
I
bring
guess
my
I'm wanting
OTs.
more physical, like what would be a device in a sensor? I just don't understand.
Yeah, so one of the devices you might see is, you see on the playground where they turn, like the little tubes that are in the middle, they'll turn them over and over again, or the balls that twist up and
Okay.
down. It's like that.
Okay. Okay.
And so I think on here, they have some of those. Another sensory is, so see the middle swing that's kind of in there, and that they can twirl around in?
I
That's
could have looked
actually-
at this picture.
Yeah, that's the picture.
Thank you.
Don't look at that picture. But as they twirl around, oddly enough, for some kids, that actually recenters them. So that's the stimulation that they need.
Okay.
So is this available for all kids, or is it just gonna be for these kids?
Primarily, this one will be for the developmental preschool, and then the SLC classroom that's there.
So
we'll
you
look-
said under the.
But is it
covered
available
area?
to everyone? Again, I just wonder if it's gonna get messed up, or.
Well, at the moment, it's not available, just because of the way it's used in the classroom.
Will it be accessible by people that might break it?
That's, yeah, I mean, they could ultimately get in.
I
Yeah,
think
so-
is that kind of the direction?
Yeah.
It's gonna be located, so the other building is very similar to this, except for that section there is covered all the way,
Right.
and so it'll be in that covered space.
Okay.
There is, we have cattle gates in there.
Is there a camera in there?
So kids on recess aren't gonna just be
I
whatever.
don't
Okay, that
believe
was-
there's a camera in there yet. I might wanna get that.
I thought there was one that shoots to that one wall, but doesn't cover the whole thing.
Yeah, I don't know.
Not that that'll prevent something, but at least we'll see what happens if somebody can't get there.
Well,
I don't
and
know
it's,
that they would.
it's in a fenced area inside of a fenced
Right.
area.
Hopefully that's good enough.
Hopefully.
Questions? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, next up, we have approval of local course equivalency greenhouse. Who's that?
Good evening. So I am here as CTE director. We have a couple of classes that are state equivalencies, but currently our greenhouse class and our future greenhouse landscaping class is not covered under state, and so we are looking to get it locally through you guys as a science credit, as we do go through a lot of it's in the plant systems pathway. And so we're just looking for you guys, and I attached the framework for the current class. The second class is currently still being built, but I can get you guys that framework as well if you would like it.
I think for us to properly approve it, we need it before us, but I
Sure.
think we can work with what we have here on this one. Only so that if somebody looks back, it's like they approved something they didn't.
They did, yes.
Which doesn't look good when it's.
Yes,
in
we'll have
papers.
that framework. It's due to OSPI by the 15th, and so they're wrapping up what they want it to look like, and so we can get that on next.
So we have we're okay with the nursery and greenhouse management? All right,
Yes.
we'll pose our question. Anybody have questions about approving that? I didn't think we'd have any questions. So I'll ask for a motion to approve, how am I gonna word this? The local course equivalency for our nursery and greenhouse management course.
So moved.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
A second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thanks for
Thank
waiting
you.
all that time. for-
Yeah, of course.
All right. Cost analysis update, restrooms, portable financing, Dan and Charlie.
So probably the best way to start is to try to recollect where we left off and what happened. And so Dan created a form in there that had a number of different things that were followed up on, and I kind of just listed pretty much what was in his email. And so Charlie was gonna follow up on some stuff. We've tried to update the financial analysis. There's some pieces that we wanna do. So as far as the lease versus buy, is there an answer to that question?
For the portable,
Yes.
yeah, the rate we're at now is virtually the same as what it would be.
There's no advantage.
No
either.
advantage to leasing.
So the secondary thing was that you talked about, and I'm just gonna kind of try to provide an outline and a framework and then let these guys talk a little bit, was the restroom. And I think everybody, but I don't want to speak for board members, talked about wanting a permanent structure versus a rental.
Right.
That
It's
pretty
something
much-
that we
own.
We own, and we're not, I mean, it's really expensive to keep these executive.
So I think I encapsulated all of what you were asking for and all of the, I got a bunch of samples in there.
You did.
But, so permanent structures, versus a portable structure to purchase. There's lots of pros and cons either way. One of them being cost. It's expensive to build a permanent structure, but, the wear and tear on a portable one might, there's a lot of kids going through it, so.
What do we pay in a year to rent the two and have them serviced?
140 something.
For the restrooms, yeah, would be,
It's about,
again, we started in January, so I mean, if we were to have an extended rental, it might be less expensive, but we've been renting it kind of on a shorter term basis thus far.
So basically, we could build something for the cost of renting for somewhere between 2 and 3 years.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And one of these built, it should last 15 to 20 years.
correct.
Then the last piece was the playground equipment. So there's three pieces, and so I think, I don't know, Dan, you wanna start with kind of the financial analysis?
I don't wanna jump in on Charlie's side, but I think in the bathrooms, there was
So,
three pieces. There's renting portable, purchasing portable, building
Yes.
permanent. So there's three
And
options.
so we just found out renting is about the same as purchasing portable, is that correct?
For one, it's about the same as renting two of them for the remainder of this, little
Yeah.
more, but
yeah,
And those aren't a permanent fix at all.
no, but the advantage of the portable ones is that one that can be moved. So if we do have some building on this campus, who's to say wherever we put the built structure might be in the way, so, you know, the portable units could also be used in the future, you know, for baseball games and softball games. There's limited restroom spaces at the high school for those activities, so they could be used for that. They could be used for the visiting teams, fans for football or soccer or whatever.
I think the trailer-based units, I would agree with Charlie. I think for what he mentioned is that a permanent structure is more expensive, and I think that you need to see how a permanent structure would integrate into a remodel of this facility. We just don't have those plans at this point. We just don't know where we place it, how, or if it would tie in with a remodel to this facility, so.
There is one piece of information that we got today from the city is that the hookup fee or whatever, yeah, 15,000 versus whatever they had, that exorbitant number.
So I would say that, yes, I would support the fact that purchasing a trailer-based option versus renting would be advised. Again, what Charlie proposed, I think, is not exactly, and correct me if I'm wrong, Charlie, not exactly the same restrooms that you have here currently, but we think that they would be serviceable.
They're used.
I saw them, it looks like a
Used
cargo
and it's
trailer.
four stalls versus 3.
So if we bought the trailers, then what about servicing the trailers?
We would still have to pay to have them
Pay for
serviced.
Do we know what
I'm
that
not,
costs?
I'm not signing up for that.
I don't wanna do that. Charlie Honey Bucket.
Well, if you think about it, if the cost was 5,000 each, and you bought 2 of them, you're 110.
Right.
And then, so how long does it take you to get to a point where you pay up to what it would cost to put one in?
Well, I'm a proponent for figuring out where it would make sense to build a solid structure so that we built it to take into consideration the expansion of the campus if we do that. It feels like when you're renting and even in purchasing, paying somebody to service it, that's a fee that goes away.
The difficulty is if we only do one permanent
I know.
structure,
Right.
then it's centralized, and so then the kids are still walking a long ways. So then do we think of doing two smaller structures?
Right.
And then, you know, of course, I priced out like a 4 to 6 stall single unit.
So the specs that they sent you, you could make it either smaller or bigger?
They have smaller and bigger.
Yeah. I
'Cause
think-
I thought, well, if these are the costs, that you're really looking at one for the cost that's.
I think the only challenge with one is like what Charlie said. I mean, currently we have 2 portables, which in my mind, that indicates there's a need, geographically, there's a need for them to be spaced out at different, because this campus is set up such that we've got, it's basically a U shape right
Right.
now. We have portables going to the west, portables going on the east, both
Then you would
extending
have
northbound.
two hookups.
Correct.
And would it be 5,000 each, or would then it go back up to, or whatever that number is?
15,000.
15 each,
15,000
15 each for the hookups? Okay.
I think the idea of having something built is great, but my worry is the school's not big enough anyway. We're gonna have to
Oh, I
do
know.
something with the school. So, and then like you said, with the 2 portables, do 2 buildings.
Right.
So I would kind of lean maybe toward purchasing the units on trailers.
I was thinking through this today, and I think I mentioned it to Dan in a phone call this afternoon. If we try to flash forward and think about how's that transition go from the campus we have now, the portables here and there and over here, and how would we build it? And my thought was, if where the portables are over there behind the gym, a wing of classrooms went along there, that we then at that time put restrooms in them, that removes the need for a portable on that end. The portables that are there, in the transition, if they move down more into that pad all the way down to the end, or at least in that area, then a fixed spot that's somewhere slightly to this side of the middle of the campus, it would alleviate how are we gonna expand if we started planning like 4 to 6 classrooms in a wing over there. The piece we would build wouldn't be temporary. The next section we would build is then, if we had to, if this campus became an 800, is remove those portables and put that secondary wing here. That way we'd have a middle restrooms down the middle, and we already have existing restrooms. That was just on the cuff thinking today, how would we do it and keep the school open? Because we can't build and not have school open on this campus. We can't close it for 2 years for construction. That was just a thought. It could be that we built where these portables or move everything down there, but I think if we decide which direction we'd like to go, we can ascertain where we would want to put a permanent structure and have one hookup.
And if we added another elementary on another piece of property, we might be able to vacate a bunch of those spaces.
Or if we have 5, 6 in a building, and so these elementary campuses become K through 4. That allows the building that we have middle school to have larger 7, 8 classrooms. I mean, there's a lot of ideas, obviously, and through the years we've discussed lots of them. But I think that discussion has to start occurring yesterday as opposed to kicking it down the road, because spending $100,000 on bathrooms because we have this problem and planning on doing that for 3 to 4 years doesn't seem like we're expending money right. And we're just kind of throwing it away.
Yeah, well, I agree that there is an ongoing cost to the, I mean, I think for us, your point is sort of well taken. If we could build a permanent structure, but have the forethought to say, how is this going to integrate into, where we're not just building it and then demolishing it in
Right.
5 years
We
and,
can't do that.
throwing the money.
That'd be just foolish. That'd be more foolish.
Right. We put $350,000 or $400,000 into a bathroom that we demolish in 5 years, because it just doesn't fit into the master remodel plan.
So we have approved keeping the portable facilities on campus through the end of the year. And we really need to, I don't know that we can have anything built by the start of school next year. I don't think that's possible. I mean, is it possible? Yeah.
It's very improbable.
Improbable.
What did they say to you?
So they are basically a kit to them, so they,
Pallets of blocks and roofing
right,
materials.
but you still have to get all the permits, permits take a while. The dirt work, you gotta pull electrical,
Yeah.
pull water, pull sewer, so it's, I bet it's 6 or 8 months.
Yeah, that, I was guessing it would be under a year, but
And I do agree with Charlie that there would be need, there could be, if we bought portable ones, they could certainly be utilized. I was just down at a girls softball game, and you'd use the restroom, you gotta go into the main building, into the locker room.
we can also
Use-
sell them if.
Yeah, or we could resell them or whatever, but,
Right.
but there is both baseball and football, or baseball and softball. There really isn't any convenient bathroom options down there for spectators.
Continuing to rent them past this year doesn't
No,
make sense, I don't think.
we need to do something different.
And if we own our own, we can shop servicing them. I imagine there's more than one company that does
Put it
that.
out to bid.
Right. Fortunately, does a decision on this have to happen tonight, on this purchasing?
No.
I would just like to have a couple weeks to study that a little bit. I've hogged, I want to make sure everybody gets to
Is,
say.
is one of the ones for 55,000 among your samples in here?
It's the picture,
It's in there.
it's the one that looks like
It's
a
just the
trailer.
floor plan.
It's just a floor.
Isn't it the gray trailer?
Which one is that?
Looks like,
It's real simple.
at least it isn't painted on the end what does it say on the end of ours?
Luxury.
Luxury.
That doesn't send the right message. It should say only choice we have, voters,
Well, Honey Bucket.
Well, the blue honey bucket
does
doesn't.
it.
Yes.
luxury. That's, yeah. Other questions from the board?
I kind of like the portable, purchasing the portable, because I think there's always going to be a need for something like that, even after we build a permanent thing. I think there's games and things that I think it seems more cost effective instead of hurrying up, rushing to find the perfect location to build one.
Right, no, I think it's a good interim. I just don't want to, sometimes when we do interim fixes, we lose sight of where we want to be, and I don't want to lose sight of we need a permanent fix. I do like the idea of seeing a fairly new gray GMC full-size pickup pulling this thing around the district with Dan driving it.
Hey.
It's matching your truck.
Yeah,
Did you get that?
Actually, we might have to bring the Ford out here, that thing's probably pretty heavy.
That's the one.
yeah.
So our next board meeting is the 10th.
Mhm.
So we can probably hone in on some questions on that. What's my opinion? I guess my primary opinion is moving away from what we got going on right now.
Well, we could buy these two for what we're spending in a year in rental and servicing on the other. I would like to have some idea of what we could expect for the servicing on them before the next meeting.
I can get some
Get
verbal
some-
quotes.
Yeah.
And how adapt are these for elementary school kids? Are they a one size and you gotta be careful the kids might get lost in there, or?
Well, they are built for adults, so I think that your older students would, which is what we have out here, fifth graders.
Well-
Although the ones over here are third graders.
What's the name of that one? On
It looks like a normal toilet. I can't believe we're having this.
Well, yeah, it's
discussion.
like an RV style.
I've had to fish my kids out, they help as they kind of fell in when they're, kindergarten age.
Right, well, that is a good point.
Charlie, is this the used one?
This is this one, right?
So, used ones, is it a hot market?
There's, yeah.
Well,
They
I mean,
move fast.
seriously. I mean, if there's not very many used ones and you find one or two that's really good used for a lot cheaper than a new one, I don't know. If you sit on things, sometimes they disappear, especially if
They
you're
could.
looking at
They're-
used ones.
These types of things I would think that are very, much more in demand in summer for concerts, festivals, and things
What's
like,
the
you
tank
know.
on the current one, Charlie?
things like that.
The tank size.
Tank size? I don't know.
It says,
They have to pump the current ones both twice a week.
Yeah, so that's a lot.
it says water tank pump, 225 gallons.
That's so you can wash your hands and stuff.
Yep.
And I would be curious if whether we could, if there is the ability to change out the toilets, some of the toilets, so that they're more kindergarten age size friendly. And, or maybe there's, seats that are smaller or something, that, I don't know, but
Well, it seems like this is the way we want
So
to
this is the one for
go,
NRT
probably.
specialty trailers, correct?
probably, yeah.
Correct, it's right there.
Why don't I have the pictures on
It's page 130.
it? Well, no, I've got it up, but I'm not seeing that particular one right there.
Is this the only place that sells them? or-
When you look, it changes every day, what's available.
There it is.
But what the guys were telling me, when I talked to a couple different companies, they put them out for long-term lease, probably like the ones that we have now. And then once they get their money back out of them on the lease, then they sell them.
And the fact that these look fairly new tells you they're making a lot of money very quickly on their leases.
So then in each one of these, there is a toilet and a urinal, or?
It looks like they're just
That
toilets.
particular one's toilets.
Toilet and wash basin probably is, that's in use.
So if we could find out how much it costs to service them, and if they can be retroed to have a urinal versus a toilet, or a smaller toilet seat, something so that we aren't fishing kindergartners out.
Yeah, the ones that do have urinals are waterless urinals. But there's a picture out there that has a standard style
Right.
toilet, which is an RV style standard. So the base of it is smaller than, but the wax ring's the same.
Okay.
So I mean,
Just, is it possible to put something down with a seat that has a smaller center so that smaller
Yeah.
bottoms aren't falling through? Any other questions? And I'm sensitive to what you said. It sounds like if these aren't available, we will be able to get something very similar. I mean, and we're only.
Potentially.
Right. And we're only looking locally. They're a trailer, so if there were one in Oregon or Idaho, we would be able to
I
buy that.
think that these were Oregon.
Oregon.
I was gonna make a couple comments before we leave this
Yeah.
topic here, unless you have more questions for Charlie specifically.
I bet you have money questions.
Just some comments.
I was gonna say, how we pay for it.
Just some comments. So I had hoped, I'm gonna kind of dovetail into this a little bit. So some of this is gonna be a repeat from what I shared with you 2 weeks ago. Is that while I certainly understand and support the fact that we have needs for classrooms, we have needs for these additional restrooms and so forth. My charge is just to make sure that we have a way of paying for these things. So, that is the avenue that I'm coming to you from. It's not debating the fact that we need these things, but just making us aware that as we make decisions, obviously that can cause other things. So what I shared with you before is that we are tying in and we're doing our transportation co-op facility by doing an inter-fund activity loan of impact fees. So the things that we're talking about is in regards to the bathrooms are applicable for impact fees. We certainly could spend impact fees on those, that's very appropriate. The challenge is that those impact fees are essentially being reserved right now for that inter-fund activity that we need to finish the building. So as we take actions that draw into those, it makes it more difficult to say at the time that I need those impact fees to finish the inter-fund activity, they may not be available to the level that I need them, okay? So with that in mind, like I said, and they shared with you the email that I put together in doing some follow-up from the last meeting. In talking with Mr. McNeil and Mr. Plager, now we haven't had a chance to get Mr. Plager's take on the cash flow projections. I will get that off to him hopefully tomorrow so that we can have that back soon as an independent review of the cash flow. But there is one, as far as if the district was to do an additional LGO, okay, for portable and playground and bathrooms and packaging all this stuff together and the roof at the middle school and so forth. The number we had talked about last time was $2 million was the number that we had talked about. The challenge for that is that state statute says that if you enter into an LGO, then obviously you have to start making semi-annual payments to that. So again, you'd be making semi-annual payments into funds that you need to reserve because you need all those funds for another activity, so it becomes a challenge. The way that we can do this to remain within the law would be is that if, and again I emphasize the word if, the district were to undergo an LGO, if we closed it in June of this year, law provides the ability to delay your first interest and principal payments for up to 12 months. That means your first payment would not begin until June of '24, which is important because then we will have gotten past that point where we will then have 3 collections of our levy. You'll have the first 2 in calendar year '23 and the spring collection in calendar year '24, of which those impact fees then will be restored at that point in time before you're making payments on new debt obligations. So that is something that would allow us to delay that first payment for up to 12 months, but we need to close in June, okay? The second thing was, as a positive that I had mentioned last time that we didn't have in the analysis, is Dan and Charlie and I had a meeting today at the city. I don't know, Dan, did you want to comment on that?
I just gave them a brief one, so
Okay.
I think the part I'll comment on is trying to dial into what's happening has been regular conversations. And so we calendared the last Monday of each month to sit down and kind of figure out where things are, and that happened today. And so Dan can
That's good.
take off from there.
Yeah, so we asked them, and I think Dan did a good job in trying to get them to make some commitments as far as what can we reasonably expect as far as additional impact fees, because that's kind of the key right here, is that we're right now at just north of that $1.6 million number. However, we're gonna rent portable bathrooms, that's gonna draw that down. I've got 2 more loan payments to make, so between the payments that I make in June and December, and the portable bathrooms, I've got about $123,000 in commitments against those impact fees. Just those activities alone is gonna take me below that $1.6 million number that I need. What that means is then we need to look at some new, what are we gonna collect in new revenues in that period of time? Based on what they shared with us today, I think that they were saying that during calendar year '23, looking at about $438,000 of new impact fees, okay? So if that does come to pass, then you would be a net of about $315,000. Basically, you're gonna take the $438 that you're gonna get, less the $123 that are your two payments plus your rental of your bathrooms. It's gonna give you a net increase of $315,000 in impact fees. If that were to come to pass, then I think, again, I don't wanna speak for Mr. Plager at DA Davidson, but that definitely, after having that meeting today, made me feel a little bit better about things. I left our meeting a couple weeks ago, you know.
Frustrated?
Still, well, no, that's
Worried?
not the correct word. Just, again, I want, and again, my nature is just, where I'm coming at this from is not debating the need, certainly not debating the need at all. But just wanting to ensure that we can do what we need to do and do so to where we have the proceeds to take care of our obligations when we need to do that.
So this LGO, if we ran it in June, we can delay the first payment for a year.
Interest and principal and interest. First principal and interest would be in June of '24, correct?
So can you repay LGO with LGO money? I know it's a weird question, but if we're worried about it's a cash flow issue is what we have. We don't have an income or a spend, we have a cash flow issue. And so if we take a larger loan, let's say 300,000 more, that covers that 100 and some that you worry about. Our first payment isn't for a year. If the new impact fees of 438 come in, then that could immediately pay that back and we're fine.
It
But
could, yep.
it gives us, it makes bean counters and board members maybe a little less worried that once a month may be not enough, not often enough to be reviewing this, because it really is a cash flow problem.
Yeah, it certainly is, and we all knew that going into this, is when financing a building through a very non-traditional format. I mean, typically a building, you would have a bond, you would have all your monies, you would do your construction. We're getting periodic payments 2 times a year, which are starting now, for the first such payments are starting now. You know, we're making it work, but it is a cash flow exercise.
And so can you repay LGO money with LGO money?
You, no, what you would do is you would have your, that's why I want to have Mr. Plager kind of take a look at it.
Because if it's interest-free for a year, we have no risk if we
Well-
borrow and keep that money.
Let's clarify. They're charging you interest, you're just not having to make an interest payment
Okay,
for
all right.
12 months.
Okay.
You're accumulating interest, it's just deferred.
At 4.1 at Kashmir,
Yeah, 4.1 versus 4.76 at Snohomish County, Treasurer. I was surprised the difference was that great between the two.
How long until after the Fed bumps and does Kashmir respond?
When I talked to Tom Brown at Kashmir again, now it's been a week or more ago, he was going to be talking with his CFO and was hopeful that they could do a 45-day lock.
that would be important because
Yeah.
I don't think 4.1 is going to stay.
Right.
And in fact, when they start looking at the competition, I would
Right.
imagine they're gonna bump it 50 basis points
Yeah.
soon.
So the second part to this revenue question was, is we looked at it from now until December 31st, that's 23. And we looked at it from January to August. So what do you have for numbers there?
70, calendar year '24, what they shared with us today is they felt that there would be 770. If that were to come to pass, be north of $1 million, $1,038,000.
So when you look at all of the different loans that you have out there, there's methods to pay them all back.
Right.
So you're saying $1 million in impact fees?
Next
For
year.
calendar year '24.
Within the city limits.
Now,
Yeah.
Dan,
That doesn't even count Gold Bar, does it?
let me qualify what you said. We could certainly use those impact fees to pay back LGOs, of which, like, the example would be what I'm calling LGO 2. LGO 1 was for the middle school roof. LGO 2 was a split. It was the turf and the portables. The portion that is essentially 60% of that, which was the portables, we can certainly use those collections to satisfy that 60%.
Right.
We can't use it to satisfy the other 40%, but we can for the 60%. Yeah.
So given those revenue expectations, and let's say they're off by 50%, because these are guesses on a lot of things, but just assuming they are, would you be more comfortable if this LGO, we run it out, has a few $100,000 more so that we have the float there? Because some of those numbers on that chart last week made me nervous when you're getting down, when we're talking
Oh.
about a budget, and we're getting down below $100,000, which for people is a lot, but in the
You
school.
mean what the running balance, what the running
Yeah, the running
balance was? Yeah, I think that, you know, we have, once we determine, we have relatively recent numbers as far as the roof is concerned at the middle school. I know that there's been work on numbers for the playground, so those will be current numbers. I think we'll have current numbers on all that stuff, but again, I've already talked to Mr. Plager. I just need to get him some revised numbers now that February, I have February all posted done, get it to him to allow him, and then he's gonna provide us a written, you know, response.
Well, I think an expectation to do LGO in June is the board in agreement that makes sense?
Oh, yeah, we need to do that.
It's just, we need to make certain that number for that LGO is adequate to take care of our cash flow needs.
Okay?
So then if
Taking
you,
into consideration our increase in revenues from impact
Well,
fees.
I felt, like I said, after I talked with Mr. McNeil, I felt better with that option of being able to defer payment, you know, interest and principal for 12 months to get us to June of 2024. And my concern just was that we've got ongoing payments, and if I'm adding another December payment on top of that, that really compounds the problem. It doesn't help, it compounds the problem.
I think the June makes sense, and then if you can get the rate lock,
Yeah,
so that
because
we
even
know
though
for sure.
a year ago, 4.1 wouldn't have sounded that great, that's pretty good.
Today it sounds pretty good, yeah. They've been, Casper's been very aggressive. They've worked with, Jim said he's worked with them several times recently, but they've been.
I use them personally, and
Yeah.
we use them in business every day.
Yep. So those were just my comments as far as that. Like I said, I was encouraged by the numbers that we got from the city today as far as expected impact fees, because that was really kind of, in my mind, the area that I was most unclear. So that added some clarity to that. But again, I'm just mindful at this point is making sure that we have resources available to do that interfund activity and have a $1.6 million in impact fees available. Because that tax anticipation note will be due in full in February of '24.
And I want to make certain we do too. Any board members have additional questions on this? How about the other, Dan? do you-
I just have a question about, you know, if you look at doing those portable ones at 55,000 piece, they're actually 42,000 or so,
About.
once you add it up. You're at about 100,000. So then, I think some kind of an idea on the size of the LGO, you know,
Yeah.
if it's not dialed in, trying to
Right.
figure out what would that be?
Right, and I agree, and I think that's, I look at that as a temporary fix for this campus, and if, I don't know how much we need them in the other places, but it sounds like they could be utilized, and if we find they aren't utilized, then I would be the first to say, let's sell them
Sell
for
them,
almost what we paid for.
Yeah.
That number needs to be at our next board meeting, what the LG, so at least a discussion number of where you, after you find out these additional revenues and you talk to all the other people.
So that would include the purchase of the rental bathrooms, correct?
Yeah.
Just for lack of a better way to describe them, bathrooms.
The
and
portable
windows.
and installation, the portable classroom, is that part of this
Well,
LGO?
So where's the portable at in this whole thing right now? Is it on the way?
They'll be here in May.
Okay. But it's not too late to,
Again, I think that we need to.
Dan Bell or mothball it?
No, I mean, I'm sure that they could, it's not here, so.
Well,
We needed to, yeah, and I'll take responsibility for that.
I'm sure
We
that
left-
I'm sure they
we-
can be stopped.
We left the meeting 2 weeks ago, and not saying I wanna, I wanna be upfront with vendors, but unless you get the process started,
Right.
you may not have gotten something,
Well,
so.
I had a conversation with
I
Dan
mean,
the
I'm-
next
I'm-
day, it said, we gotta get, if we don't get in line,
Right,
we won't
you
have
got zero
something
chance.
available.
Yeah, you got zero
Well,
chance.
and they had to build it.
Right.
Yep.
and that's part of the question, do they have inventory, do they not?
Right.
Because usually they're building them. We first understood they had inventory. When we next talked to them, they didn't have
They didn't.
inventory.
Right.
So I
So
don't
why
know if
would
they
we
ever
wanna
had inventory.
stop it?
I think we don't wanna stop it permanently, but delay, because we won't have money for it until June, and it's arriving in May, so we have a month there where we're not paying the bill.
I think that's gonna be okay. I think that June works. I think it's just a matter of
They seem to be
the.
okay with that.
30-day net or
Well,
60-day
we
net.
tried to explain without getting too far into the weeds that, look, ordering this thing, we just don't have cash on hand. But obviously, we're ordering a portable because we don't have aluminum.
Right, And that's
Yeah.
where
Potentially
that
don't have
delay
to.
or stuff.
Yeah.
And that means there's more kids, and so just paying it off or whatever, that's where the lease versus the buy came into play.
So if they're fine with paying it later, don't stop it.
Well, I don't think we're planning on stopping it. We just have to find a solution. And if we can pay it after it arrives, there's the solution.
Yes, like I said, I think that when we got the option of doing the 12-month deferral, that made me feel better about things. The information that we received today from the city made me feel better about things. So I think once I get, Mr. Plager's take on things, then I think in 2 weeks, we can have a comprehensive final report with recommendations to issue to you. I just don't, we're getting closer, but I just don't feel we have full and complete information yet,
All right.
yet.
And if you get it before 2 weeks,
Mhm.
please,
Mhm.
even parts so that we know.
Yep.
Charlie,
Oh, go ahead.
in your parts of this, do you see any concerns or questions that we haven't addressed tonight?
No, you just want costs for, servicing of the portable units.
Yeah.
I think ideally, like I said, what we would like to do would be do the roof on the middle school this summer. Okay, well, that's the primary driver for the LGO is that.
Right.
That's the primary driver. That's what started this conversation a month or so ago. Portable here, bathrooms, playground equipment, and so forth. So, depending on what we do, we could be 2.5, 2.6, somewhere in that range.
We don't need it to be way above. We
No.
need it to cover it and make certain it covers all of our cash flow, because there's
Right.
dips and dives.
So
in
that
chart.
covers 2.5 or 6 covers all three components.
Well, it was we talked about before we were talking about those things, was 2 million, okay? So if you're talking about, your portable, okay, and then you're talking about playground equipment, and you're talking about bathrooms, yeah, it's gonna be probably in that number.
And I still think if we make certain there's a couple $100,000 in there,
Right.
so that those numbers aren't dipping down in the 80s and $100,000. And I know we're paying 4.1%
Right.
yearly, but as those revenues come in, there's nothing stopping us from paying quicker.
Correct, because I don't want to.
And it's simple interest, so if we look down the road in 3 years, if we pull this all off, we're gonna have saved a lot of money by doing it sooner, not having inflation affect it.
And Cashmere's always been very flexible in that way. There's been we've prepaid early before, there is no payment or prepayment penalty as far as that's concerned. So, yeah, I just want to be sure that the capital projects fund can stand on its own, because, again, the fund of last resort would be the general fund. If there was not monies there, we would have to do a transfer from general fund to cover those obligations.
Any other questions for Dan on this subject? All right.
So when we come back, the 10th is a Monday, so it'll be April 10th. First day back from spring break.
So you'll be working during spring break a little?
I plan on working some during, well, I hope to get this off to him this
That-
week and.
Perfect, maybe you'll have answers before and we'll.
Maybe.
There's an
Maybe
impetus to do that.
I might have something by Friday to share, so.
Very good. Next up, I think we've talked about this individually, but it's a weighted vote resolution that we heard about when we were at Olympia at the legislative conference. Dan?
Yeah, so, there was a kind of an unusual deal. I didn't know that it was even existed, but being a small school district, we are definitely the tail and getting wagged. And so what we understand is with 5 districts signing this weighted resolution, it would remove the weighted vote from your size, because we end up, kind of not really having a voice. And so this is, one of several school districts that board directors in smaller districts are trying to sign, and this is the resolution. So we'll sign this, or have the directors vote on it, and at least preliminarily, they like it. We'll see where it ends up. Turn it in, and then I think we go to something in May, if I remember correctly, and it's more of a, kind of the next step up, local group, and something happens there. And again, it's so new to us that, I just learned about it. And I think probably it came about because, frustration of the way some of the policy stuff works that doesn't really apply to us. Yet, it's the umbrella we live under, so.
Well, Seattle and Tacoma and 1 or 2 other school districts with their weighted votes can can set the agenda for what WASA works on,
Yeah.
lobbying in Olympia. And this would make it so that we have the same power as Seattle and the same power as Everett. And the small districts can have a voice, because you can tell some years, this wasn't so bad this year, but some years it's like, these are agenda items that don't impact our students as much as they impact Seattle. So this is a way to take some of that power back. And I don't think when they wrote the bylaws, they had the power of the 5.
That's correct. Yeah, so that's what this is, and, you know, the next step is having the board take a vote on it, signing off on it, and then we deliver it and see if what we've learned comes to be the outcome.
Questions? Then I'll ask for a motion to approve our weighted vote resolution 21-19.
So moved.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Hopefully 4 other districts are doing the same as we speak.
I know Grand Falls has, because I texted back and forth with the superintendent, and they did theirs at their March 7th board meeting, but I don't know beyond that.
Okay, superintendent's report, MHAC update.
Yeah, so it's a mental health advisory committee that Gigi and Heidi Dawson, and so Paul, myself, Dan Ballard, in this room were there. I thought it was a good meeting, and a really great start. I'll talk a little bit, but certainly would encourage you to get others. There was probably 20 people, maybe a few more. We had a group that was on Zoom that we looped into the meeting, and tried to, as an initial meeting, identify the 3 or 4 things that were most important to people. And that'll, continue to flesh itself out as we go. We want to get student voice involved. Last Friday, I was part of a region-wide thing that I'm going to share with the group on, I think it's called Forward, which is a statewide group that has to do with suicide and supporting school districts in it. And so it's really just the beginning, but I think there's a universal agreement that students and others are struggling. I've had principals describe to me that it's just unbelievable seeing some of the challenges kids are dealing with, or some of the mental state that seems to have.
It's nationwide.
Yeah, it's just a huge problem. And so our next meeting is.
Next Monday.
No, it's got pushed
Oh,
back.
that's
We pushed
right.
it out of spring break.
Oh, that's right, yeah, you're right. It's the
But we're gonna do,
17th.
it's the 17th, but we're gonna do a lot by email before that, kind of to decide on what our priorities are.
So I don't know, Gigi, Dan, Paul, do you guys want to have anything to say?
I think it went really well. We had a good amount of people. They came up with a lot of good goals, so we just need to narrow them down. Survey Monkey we wanted to do,
Yeah.
and we wanted to invite staff to the meetings, and like I said, get some students involved.
Student voice.
Yeah.
And I was gonna pull the healthy use survey and see what data we do have, as said, and I was gonna pull the CEE
CEE?
data.
Whatever that is.
So, Mike, there's mental health in the CEE data, isn't there?
Yes.
Yeah. And so pull what we've done so far and go from there and see where we are. And then, I don't know, Dan or Paul, comments?
No, that was good. I'm still, hopeful that I want to get a better understanding of the challenges that kids are really facing today. I mean, I would love for students to come and share really what they're really struggling with.
I think it's great that people are donating their time. We have that many people involved, and it is an issue.
I've been amazed by both of these groups, folks that I haven't met, and some of the just real interesting backgrounds that they bring and the real, community benefit that they have to offer. It's been really interesting.
It's different going to school today than when we went to school. The issues kids are facing are completely different.
We're starting to see, social media, they're starting to lock that down. I think that's part of the problem, but CFAC, Citizen Facility Advisory Committee, we've had 4 meetings with our updated group. It has a combination of some members from the previous and some new members, and again, there's some really interesting people, have a lot to offer. Today, we toured with a small group, Sultan Elementary School and Sultan High School, and they wanted to see school in session and see what it was like, and so you can take them and you know, it's one thing to visit a school that's empty, you can see certain things. It's another thing to visit it when it is in operation, in classrooms, watching the lunch take place. You know, in this particular campus, we got to talk about how we tried to open up the back. Are we having problems out on the street in front still, or not as bad?
Occasionally, it's not an everyday thing like.
But there is quite a few cars back here now.
Yeah, I've seen that,
Yeah.
downtown.
Yeah. So there's challenges. no
Well, we
doubt
have
about
a lot of kids all getting picked up.
If we got another 60,
Yeah.
And so then on Tuesday, the same group is gonna go to Gold Bar in the middle school. And so those visits you'll hopefully see through the remainder of the year, where they get to see the, you know, I'll do it with a different group, and then, you know, different groups. And just, really, it's not anything different than walking through the halls and watching the school in operation, talking about some of the challenges that the facility offers. You can see some of them. Some of them you have to describe. You know, if you look at this particular school where you've got it built for X amount of kids, and the kitchen is the same way, and the bathrooms, it just adds a challenge. And you got to see that when we were in the lunchroom, for sure, for sure. But it's just trying to build that background, and then I'm meeting Thursday with a group of 4 that are gonna serve in a leadership role, and we're gonna outline some further steps, visiting Salem Woods and Monroe. So you get to see what a new learning space looks like. You know, we're gonna have to bring in some help at some point to build some models that we can share with you so that, you know, you can say, okay, because you can't just fix this school and not deal with your population problem. You got both of them going on, and so you have to figure out a way to deal with that. That's kind of it.
I wanted to comment, we received a letter from a student at the high school about
Yeah, oh, that's
some
right,
lunches.
yeah.
And I've done a little snooping around, and a couple things came to me, and that is, we have 2 lunch periods at the high school. And if you have first lunch period, your selection is better. And by second lunch period, a lot of the things that you might be able to choose, we run out because we don't make as, we don't want to throw anything away. We need to address it so that they
Dan's
equal, they should have the same offerings for both lunches. I mean, it shouldn't be, well, I'm sorry, this year on second lunch and I can't get the fruits of any season.
So that's what that was about.
I think there's a lot to that. I don't know, but from the people I talked to, they're guessing that student might have second period lunch,
Okay.
which is a lesser thing.
Mhm.
I mean, I know they can't be gourmet meals, but they should be able to have a selection that is edible and quality food.
Right, right. No, I know the message that you're referring to, and it's unfortunate that the submitter remained anonymous so that we can't, you know, really ask some questions.
But we can look. I mean,
We
I
can-
thought about
we
going
can-
and having lunch tomorrow, first and
Right.
second lunch, to see what the
Right.
offerings were.
We can do surveys,
Surveys.
we've done those before, and there's different things you can do.
We do have a new food service director from Sodexo. They have brought in Stacy Anderson is her name. So she just joined us on Friday, was her first day. So as our person that is the interim director, Ben Guyton, is going to be transitioning out as she starts, we're having daily meetings, you know, and discussing things.
Well, it's a
something-
perfect time to make
Yeah,
something
something we'll
work.
certainly talk with Stacy about.
Even though a student didn't have their name, if an adult did that, I wouldn't listen nearly as much, but it's a student in the school, and, you know, who knows why they wouldn't, but it was well-written. and-
It was well, to me, yes, I agree. As I read it, Russ, I felt it had, obviously was more impactful because it was well written, it seemed to be
And they didn't have an
thoughtful.
axe to grind, they didn't say anybody was at
No.
fault, they just want good food.
No.
Anything else?
No, we just need to chat a little bit
Yeah.
about Friday.
Yeah, so, I guess we can do that at a public meeting, at least have it. Are you are we all planning on riding down at the same time, or are you driving down yourself?
I'm not sure yet.
Okay,
I might go down the night before,
okay.
but I'll know tomorrow.
Okay, sooner than, because
Yeah,
if there's 4 of us, we need to figure out how we can, it would be best, I think, if we all went in one vehicle.
Yeah.
I would still need a ride back.
Okay. So
Still need a decent sized vehicle.
I can drive us, but if it's raining that day, because luggage would have to go in the back of my pickup. So that's where the dilemma
It
is.
is supposed to rain Friday.
I got the same issue.
Yeah.
Isn't there
See what Fridays.
a nice car the district has?
Do we have an Expedition?
Oh,
We have a.
But it would be gone for,
Explorer. We have.
I was gonna say, you know how much luggage ladies take when they travel? I'm not gonna say that.
I think one of those would
We have
work.
an Uplander, we have Astro, we have an Escape, we have,
Well, we may have to take two.
we have a school bus.
Yeah. No, we're not.
So I have to get a CDL in 3 days. No, I think one of those vehicles will work, if that's what we're doing.
Okay, and that vehicle would be out of district for 5 days, 4 days?
But it's spring break and part of the weekend,
Okay,
so I don't
all
think
right.
it'd be a
And
problem.
then transportation from the airport to the hotel.
I've got that all,
We'll
Kayla
Uber
helps us figure that
Email
out.
me directly so I can see what, if you're gonna go down that path, so I can make sure there's a vehicle available.
I'll let
Or
you, I'll call you tomorrow.
Okay.
Uber, I mean,
Yeah, I put the Uber app.
and I use it all the time, so if I have to do it, I'll just save my receipts and put them in the envelope you provided. It's about, if I remember right, it's about a 15 or 20-minute ride from the airport to the convention center. I would recommend, I've changed what I was gonna wear to convention, so you don't have to wear the equivalent of shirt and tie. It's supposed to be 90 degrees during the day, so you may be wearing polos and shorts and tennis shoes.
I'm gonna have to do a little digging.
Yeah.
Got a few months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What will be air conditioned inside?
That's right.
Yeah, it will
Stay
be.
inside.
Our flight is at
9:50.
8:50,
Yeah.
so we want to be down, I think we'd want to leave here 5:30 or 6. I like to
Yeah,
be,
I mean, 2
we have to be there
hours
at that time of morning. If we leave at 5:30 from here, we'll be down there at 6:30. If we're going to use a school car, I recommend we make a reservation in Doug Fox. So we have Heartland, it's right across from here. I use them every time, and with the reservation, it's really easy. I can set that up.
Okay.
So we'll talk, I'll call her next tomorrow. We'll plan on
Where are we gonna meet?
5:30 here at the district office unless we'll do the timeline, make sure that's enough time. It may be 5.
So can I leave my car here for that
Yeah,
time?
you should be able to leave your POV in the parking lot there, there's cameras on it.
By the school or district office.
Right in front of the district office.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll just probably have my wife come down and pick
Drop you
up
off.
mine,
Okay.
or if I've got.
We have Jill, right, that's all the time she's in.
Yeah, I wouldn't have anybody to come get me at the time that we'll be getting back, so. I can drive.
Okay, so tentatively 5:30, meet here at the district office, and we'll use a district vehicle. I'll let you know tomorrow for certain. Everybody know how many suitcases they're gonna have, so we can map that.
12.
Check in one.
See, lived up to my expectation.
Don't worry, she'll just.
One for
buy extra when
shoes,
she's done.
one for jewelry, one for
All of
blouses.
one, but it's big.
Okay.
Mine have one as big.
Okay, so you'll be checking.
Yes.
Yes. There's no way I can do
And have you got a new suitcase in San Diego?
You know,
with
my
the short
son
handle?
got a
You
new
need at least two
suitcase, and I
outlets
told him
a
I'm
day.
gonna borrow it. Russ has seen my suitcase.
We were in the San Diego airport and Dan's suitcase handle wouldn't roll up, so he had to walk hunchback.
Well, luckily it's short.
It was short. It was
So finally I got upset and said, okay, I'm just gonna, like that, and it finally
Yes,
popped
it
out.
did. It was fantastic. It was a good time. All right, I think that's all the business for the evening, so I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.